Welcome aboard the Bedtime Express, your nightly journey to peaceful sleep and wonderful dreams. Tonight, our journey takes us to ancient China, where under moonlit skies, the Great Wall winds like a sleeping dragon across the mountains. You'll follow Wei, a young builder, as he places stone upon stone, weaving his dreams into a wall that will stand for generations. So settle in, close your eyes, and let the echoes of hammers and the whisper of the mountain wind guide you toward peaceful rest. Feel the calm of the night and the strength of each stone as sleep draws near. But before you fall asleep, please give us a gentle like, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our nightly adventures. Your support helps us bring you more stories from faraway times and places, each one a gentle bridge to your dreams. All aboard the Bedtime Express. Next stop, the Great Wall. The Great Wall of China, a worker's dream. My name is Wei, and I was but a young man when the great work began. In those ancient days when the morning mist still clung to our village like a silk blanket, I would wake to the sound of my grandmother's gentle voice, telling stories of dragons that slept in the mountains. She spoke of walls that could touch the sky and protect our people from the fierce winds of the north. Little did I know that I would one day help build such a wall myself. Our village was small and peaceful, nestled in a valley where the rice grew tall and green in terraced fields that climbed the hillsides like giant steps. The houses were built of wood and clay, with curved roofs that reminded me of sleeping cats basking in the warm sunshine. Cherry trees bloomed along the main path each spring, their pale pink petals falling like snow when the wind stirred their branches. Children would chase these petals, laughing as they tried to catch them before they touched the ground, believing that each captured petal would bring a year of good fortune. The village well stood at the center of our small community, surrounded by smooth stones worn glossy by countless hands and feet. Here the women would gather each morning and evening, their voices creating a gentle symphony as they shared news and wisdom while drawing water for their families. The well was more than just a source of water. It was the heart of our village, where friendships were formed, problems were solved, and celebrations were planned. Its ancient stones had witnessed generations of our people, holding within them the memories of countless conversations, laughter, and tears. My father's farm was on the gentle slope above the village, where our family had grown rice and vegetables for more generations than anyone could remember. The soil was rich and dark, fed by streams that trickled down from the mountains carrying minerals that made everything grow strong and healthy. We had 3 water buffalo who helped with the heavy work, their dark eyes patient and wise as they pulled our wooden plow through the muddy fields. I knew each of them by name: Old Thunder with his massive horns, Gentle Cloud who loved to wade in the deepest water, and young mountain who was strong but sometimes playful. The rice paddies themselves were works of art, carefully engineered terraces that followed the natural contours of the land. Each level was precisely calculated to allow water to flow gently from one terrace to the next, creating a system that had worked perfectly for hundreds of years. In spring, when the young rice shoots first emerged from the flooded fields, the terraces looked like mirrors reflecting the sky, broken only by the bright green lines of growing grain. By summer, they had become waves of emerald that swayed in the wind, whispering secrets that only the old farmers could understand. My sister May was 2 years younger than me, with a laugh like silver bells and hands that could weave the most beautiful cloth from silk threads. She spent her days at the loom in our house, creating fabrics so fine that merchants from distant cities would travel to our village just to see her work. Her patterns told stories. Some showed birds flying over mountains, others depicted flowers blooming in gardens where lovers walked beneath the moon. When she worked, humming soft melodies, the whole house seemed filled with peace and contentment. May had learned her craft from our aunt, who had studied in the capital city before returning to our village with knowledge of the most sophisticated weaving techniques. She could create silk so fine it seemed to float in the air, and her colors were so vivid they appeared to glow with their own inner light. The secret, she once told me, was not just in the technique, but in the love and attention she put into every thread. Each strand of silk carries the life of the silkworm that made it, she would say, and we must honor that gift by creating something beautiful and lasting. My grandmother was the keeper of our family's stories and wisdom. Every evening, as the cooking fire painted warm light on the walls of our main room, she would sit in her favorite chair and tell tales that had been passed down through countless generations. She spoke of heroes who could leap over mountains, of wise emperors who ruled with justice and compassion, and of magical places where spirits dwelled in ancient trees and crystal springs. Her voice was like music, rising and falling with the rhythm of her stories, painting pictures in my mind more vivid than any artist could create on silk or paper. Grandmother's chair was carved from a single piece of camphor wood, smoothed and polished by decades of use until it gleamed like honey in the firelight. It had belonged to her own grandmother, and before that to grandmothers stretching back into the mists of time. The arms of the chair were carved with dragons and phoenixes, symbols of power and renewal that seemed to dance in the flickering light of our evening fires. When she sat there telling her stories, it was as if all the wisdom of our ancestors flowed through her voice into our eager young hearts. One of her favorite tales was about the moon goddess Changa, who lived in a palace made of silver light among the lunar mountains. According to grandmother, Changa watched over all the builders and craftsmen of the world, blessing their work with strength and permanence. "When you work with your hands to create something beautiful," she would say, her eyes twinkling in the firelight, "the moon goddess sees your efforts and weaves a little of her silver light into your creation, making it last longer than ordinary human work." These stories filled my dreams with images of magical craftsmanship and gave me an early appreciation for the sacred nature of skilled work. The year was long ago, when Emperor Qin ruled our vast land with wisdom and strength. Word came to our village like a whisper carried on the wind. The emperor needed strong hands and willing hearts to build a great barrier across the mountains. This wall would stretch further than any man could walk in many moons, protecting our families and our fields from those who would do us harm. The call echoed through every valley and every rice terrace, reaching even our small village nestled between the rolling hills. The messenger who brought this news was a tall man with kind eyes and clothes that showed he had traveled far. He rode a horse the color of autumn leaves, and his saddlebags were filled with scrolls bearing the emperor's seal. When he spoke to our gathered villagers, his voice carried the authority of the imperial court, but also the gentleness of someone who understood that he was asking families to make great sacrifices. "Your sons will return as heroes," he promised, "having built something that will protect China for 1,000 generations." The messenger stayed in our village for 3 days, answering questions and explaining the great project in detail. He spoke of master architects who had spent years planning the wall's route, following mountain ridges and natural barriers to create the strongest possible defense. He described the engineering marvels that would be required: bridges spanning deep gorges, towers rising from impossible cliff tops, underground passages through solid rock. Most importantly, he spoke of the honor that would come to those who participated in this great work, becoming part of something that would stand forever as a testament to the strength and unity of our people. That night, our family sat together longer than usual around the cooking fire. My mother prepared my favorite meal: rice with vegetables from our garden, fish caught in the stream that ran behind our house, and tea made from leaves she had dried herself during the summer months. We ate slowly, savoring not just the food, but the precious time together, knowing that soon this peaceful routine might be interrupted. My father spoke of his own father, who had traveled to the capital city as a young man to help build a temple, returning with stories of incredible beauty and craftsmanship that had inspired our family for generations. My mother, usually so practical and focused on the daily tasks of running our household, seemed lost in thought that evening. She kept glancing at me with an expression I had never seen before: pride mixed with worry, love mixed with fear. Finally, she spoke in her soft voice that always seemed to carry the wisdom of earth and growing things. "My son," she said, "if you choose to answer this call, know that you carry with you not just your own hopes, but the prayers of all who love you. The skills you have learned here, working in our fields and helping your father build our storage barns, these will serve you well in whatever great work you undertake." The decision to answer the emperor's call was not an easy one. I was the eldest son, and traditionally I would inherit the farm and continue the work that our family had done for so long. But something in my heart stirred when I heard about the Great Wall, something that whispered of adventure and purpose beyond the familiar boundaries of our village. I dreamed of mountains I had never seen, of working alongside men from distant provinces, of creating something so magnificent that it would inspire wonder in all who saw it. For days, I walked through our familiar fields and along the paths I had known since childhood, trying to imagine what life would be like in a distant place among strangers. The work itself didn't frighten me. I had grown strong helping my father with the heavy tasks of farming, and I had learned patience from watching rice grow slowly from seed to harvest. What gave me pause was the thought of leaving behind everything and everyone I had ever known, stepping into a world completely different from the gentle rhythms of village life. I remember the morning I decided to answer that call. The sun rose like a golden coin over the eastern mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that reminded me of my mother's favorite silk. The air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of jasmine flowers and fresh earth. My father, a man whose hands were weathered like old leather from years of farming, placed those strong hands on my shoulders. His eyes, kind and deep like still water, looked into mine with both pride and sorrow. "My son," he said in his gentle voice, "if you must go, carry with you the strength of our ancestors and the love of your family. Remember that every stone you place will protect not just strangers, but your own mother and sister, your own village and fields. Work with honor, and may the spirits of the mountains guide your hands." His words wrapped around my heart like a warm embrace, giving me courage for the journey ahead. The village temple, where our family had worshipped for generations, became a place of special significance during those final days before my departure. The old priest, Master Liu, had known me since I was a baby, and he spent long hours teaching me prayers that would protect me in distant places. He gave me a small wooden Buddha, carved from sandalwood and worn smooth by countless faithful hands, to carry with me as a reminder of home and spiritual protection. "This Buddha has watched over 3 generations of your family," he said, placing it carefully in my palm, "and now it will watch over you as you do this great work for our emperor and our people." My mother packed my few belongings in a cloth bundle, a spare tunic, my father's old hat to shield me from the sun, and a small jade amulet that had belonged to my grandfather. She included dried rice and vegetables, enough food for several days of walking. But most precious of all, she tucked in a small scroll with a poem she had written, words that would remind me of home when the work grew difficult. Her tears fell silently as she tied the bundle closed, each drop a prayer for my safe return. The night before my departure, I walked through our house one final time, trying to memorize every detail. The main room where we gathered for meals, with its low table polished smooth by years of use and its walls decorated with my sister's most beautiful weavings. The kitchen where my mother worked her daily magic, transforming simple ingredients into meals that nourished both body and spirit. My own small room, with its narrow window that looked out over the rice terraces and the mountains beyond, where I had dreamed so many dreams that were now about to become reality. The village gathered to see us off, for I was not the only young man answering the emperor's call. My childhood friends Lu and Zhang would walk beside me on this great journey. Old Master Chen, who had taught us to write beautiful characters with brush and ink, gave each of us a blessing. The children of the village followed us to the edge of the fields, their laughter mixing with the morning song of the larks. Even the old water buffalo in the rice paddies seemed to watch us go with their patient, knowing eyes. Liu had always been the strongest among us, with broad shoulders and hands that could grip a plow handle without tiring even during the longest days of spring planting. He came from a family of woodcutters who lived on the slopes above our village, and he knew the mountains better than any of us. His knowledge of weather patterns and forest paths would prove invaluable during our journey. Zhang, meanwhile, was the cleverest, quick with numbers, and able to solve problems that left the rest of us scratching our heads in confusion. His father was the village accountant, and Zhang had inherited not just mathematical ability, but also a talent for organization that would serve us well in the complex work ahead. As we walked along the winding path that led away from everything familiar, I turned back once to see the village growing smaller behind us. The curved roofs of our houses looked like sleeping dragons in the morning light, and thin columns of smoke rose peacefully from the chimneys into the pale blue sky. My grandmother stood in her doorway, her white hair gleaming like silver in the sunlight, her hand raised in a final farewell. I carried that image with me like a treasured painting, knowing it would comfort me in the days ahead. The road to the mountains was long and filled with wonders I had never seen. We passed through valleys where the grass grew tall and green, swaying like ocean waves in the gentle breeze. We crossed rivers that sang over smooth stones, their water so clear we could see the fish dancing in the depths. Ancient trees spread their branches over our heads like protective umbrellas, their leaves whispering secrets in languages older than memory. At night, we would make camp under stars so bright they seemed close enough to pluck like flowers. One evening, as we sat around our small campfire cooking rice in a borrowed pot, an old merchant joined us for the night. He had been traveling the roads for more years than we had been alive, and his stories opened our eyes to the vastness of the world beyond our village. He spoke of cities where millions of people lived in buildings that rose like mountains toward the sky, of deserts where the sand shifted constantly like water, and of seas so wide that a man could sail for months without seeing land. "The wall you are going to build," he told us, his weathered face serious in the firelight, "will be one of the wonders of the world, something that people will travel vast distances just to see." Along the way, we met other young men from villages near and far. Some came from the rice fields like us, with hands soft from working in mud and water. Others came from the mountains, their bodies strong from cutting wood and carrying heavy loads up steep paths. There were fishermen whose skin was darkened by sun and salt wind, and craftsmen who could shape wood and metal with tools that seemed to dance in their skilled fingers. Each brought his own skills, his own stories, his own dreams of the great work we would do together. We learned from each other as we traveled, sharing techniques and knowledge that came from our different backgrounds. The mountain men taught us how to read the weather by watching the behavior of birds and the color of distant clouds. The fishermen showed us knots that would hold under any strain and ways to preserve food that would keep it fresh for many days. The craftsmen shared their understanding of tools and materials, knowledge that would prove invaluable when we began the actual construction work. As we traveled deeper into the wilderness, the mountains began to rise around us like sleeping giants. Their peaks disappeared into wisps of cloud, and their slopes were covered in forests so thick and green they looked like velvet cloaks. The air grew thinner and cooler with each step, and sometimes we would hear the call of eagles soaring high above, their voices echoing off the stone cliffs. It was in these mountains that we would build something that would last forever, something that would become part of the earth itself. The paths became steeper and more challenging as we climbed higher into the mountain regions. Sometimes we would walk for hours along narrow tracks that had been carved into cliff sides, with nothing but empty air on one side and solid rock on the other. Other times we would follow ancient stream beds that had been dry for years, their smooth stones providing the only level surface for miles. The vegetation changed as we gained elevation. The familiar rice and bamboo of the lowlands gave way to pine and fir trees that filled the air with their clean, sharp fragrance. We began to encounter evidence of the great construction project long before we reached the main work site. Supply trains of ox-drawn carts moved along the mountain roads, carrying everything from blocks of stone to barrels of rice wine for the workers. Temporary bridges had been built across streams and gorges, engineering marvels in their own right that showed us the scale and ambition of what we were joining. Work camps dotted the mountainsides like small villages, their cooking fires visible at night like fallen stars scattered across the dark slopes. When we finally reached the great construction site, I stood in amazement at what lay before us. Thousands of men were already at work, moving like busy ants across the mountainside. Some carried stones in woven baskets, others mixed mortar with wooden tools, and still others guided ox-drawn carts loaded with timber and supplies. The sound of their work, hammering, scraping, calling to each other, created a rhythm like a giant's heartbeat echoing through the valleys. Smoke rose from cooking fires and forges, creating a haze that caught the sunlight and made everything shimmer like a dream. The organization of the work site was more complex than anything I had ever imagined. Different sections were devoted to different activities: stone cutting, mortar mixing, timber preparation, metalworking for tools and hardware. Teams of workers moved materials along carefully planned routes that minimized confusion and delays. Supervisors with years of experience coordinated the efforts of hundreds of men, ensuring that each group's work complemented rather than interfered with the others. It was like watching a giant machine made not of metal and gears, but of human intelligence and cooperation. The wall itself, even in its early stages, took my breath away. It followed the ridge of the mountains like a great stone dragon, curving and climbing with the natural shape of the land. Where it was already completed, it stood tall and proud, its stones fitted together so perfectly that not even a blade of grass could grow between them. Watchtowers rose at regular intervals, like stone flowers blooming from the wall's back, their small windows looking out over the vast wilderness beyond. This was not just a wall, it was a wonder, a poem written in stone across the face of the mountains. The sleeping quarters for new workers were simple but clean, long buildings built of wood and stone that could house dozens of men in comfort. Each man had his own sleeping mat and a small space for personal belongings, but we quickly learned that privacy was less important than the camaraderie that developed among workers who shared the challenges and triumphs of each day. The buildings were designed to stay warm in winter and cool in summer, with ingenious ventilation systems that kept the air fresh even when they were fully occupied. Master Huang was the man who taught me the sacred art of building the wall. He was old like a weathered mountain, with hands that had touched more stones than there are stars in the sky. His beard was white as winter snow, and his eyes held the patience of someone who had watched many seasons come and go. When he spoke, his voice was quiet like wind through pine trees, but every word carried the weight of years of wisdom. He had been building walls since before my father was born, and the stones seemed to know him like old friends. Master Huang had begun his career as a young man working on the emperor's palaces in the capital city, where he learned the finest techniques of stone cutting and architectural design. He had studied under masters who traced their knowledge back through generations of builders, inheriting secrets that had been carefully guarded and passed down only to the most worthy students. His expertise went far beyond simple construction. He understood the mathematics of load distribution, the chemistry of mortars, and the art of making structures that would become more beautiful with age rather than deteriorating over time. Master Huang's workshop was a place of wonder and learning. Tools hung from wooden pegs on the walls, hammers of different sizes for different tasks, chisels sharp enough to split hairs, measuring devices made from bamboo and bronze that could determine if a wall was perfectly straight from great distances. Scrolls containing architectural drawings covered one entire wall, showing plans for towers, gates, and defensive positions that would make the wall not just a barrier, but a complete system of protection. The air always smelled of stone dust and pine pitch, mixed with the sweet aroma of the tea he kept brewing in a small pot beside his workbench. In one corner of the workshop stood a scale model of a completed section of wall, built with the same attention to detail as the real structure, but small enough to be studied and understood at a glance. This model showed not just the visible parts of the wall, but also the hidden foundations, drainage systems, and internal supports that made it strong enough to withstand earthquakes, floods, and the battering of enemy weapons. Master Huang would use this model to teach us the principles of construction, showing how each element contributed to the strength and stability of the whole. "Young Wei," he said on my first morning, as the sun painted the eastern peaks with gold, "building the Great Wall is not just about placing stone upon stone. It is about understanding the spirit of the mountain, the nature of the earth, and the dreams of our people. Each stone must find its proper place, like each star finds its place in the vast sky. We are not conquering the mountain, we are becoming part of it, adding our work to what nature has already created." The first lesson was learning to see stones not as simple rocks, but as individuals with their own personalities and purposes. Master Huang would pick up a piece of granite and hold it in his weathered hands, turning it slowly, examining every surface and angle. "This stone," he would say, "wants to be a cornerstone. See how solid and square it is? But this one," he would pick up another, "is meant for the top of an arch, where its curved edge will help distribute weight evenly." He taught me to feel the weight of each stone, to understand its grain and texture, to know instinctively whether it would be strong under pressure or better suited for decorative work. Learning to read stone required developing an almost mystical sensitivity to the material. Master Huang taught me to tap stones lightly with a small hammer and listen to the sound they made. A clear, ringing tone indicated solid, strong stone, while a dull thud suggested internal cracks or weaknesses that might cause problems later. He showed me how to examine the grain patterns in different types of stone, understanding how they had been formed over millions of years and how that formation affected their strength and durability. "Stone is like frozen music," he would say. and we must learn to hear its song before we can make it part of our wall. The quarry where we selected our building materials was like entering another world. Skilled workers used iron tools and carefully controlled fires to split massive blocks from the mountain face, following the natural fractures in the rock to create pieces that would fit together like the parts of a great puzzle. The sound of their work echoed off the cliff walls, the ring of metal on stone, the crack of splitting rock, the rumble of heavy blocks being moved by teams of oxen. Steam rose from areas where fires had heated the rock to make it easier to work, creating a mystical atmosphere that made the whole quarry seem touched by ancient magic. The quarry workers were artists in their own right, able to visualize how a massive block of raw stone could be divided into smaller pieces, perfectly suited for specific purposes. They worked with the natural grain and fracture lines of the rock, using their deep understanding of geology to maximize the useful stone they could extract from each section of the mountain. Their tools were extensions of their bodies, hammers and chisels wielded with precision that came from years of experience and an intuitive understanding of how stone behaved under different conditions. He showed me how to choose the right stones from the quarry, where skilled workers split rock from the mountain face with careful precision. Some stones were large and strong, meant to form the foundation that would bear the weight of all that came above. Others were smaller and more delicate, perfect for filling gaps and creating smooth surfaces. The most beautiful stones were saved for special places, corners where the wall turned, gateways where travelers would pass, and the tops of watchtowers that would catch the light of dawn and sunset. Master Huang taught me to feel each stone with my hands before placing it. "Close your eyes, Wei," he would say, "and let the stone tell you where it belongs. Feel its weight, its texture, its shape." A good stonemason listens with his fingers as much as with his ears. Under his patient guidance, I learned to sense which side of a stone should face outward to catch rain and wind, and which side should nestle against its neighbors for the strongest bond. This tactile understanding of stone became second nature over time, developing into an almost supernatural ability to know instantly whether a particular stone was right for a particular place. My hands learned to detect subtle variations in texture that indicated strength or weakness, to feel the natural grain that would determine how a stone would weather over the years. Sometimes I could pick up a stone and immediately know exactly where it belonged in the structure we were building, as if the stone itself was guiding me to its proper place. The mortar we used was not simple mud, but a mixture as complex as a recipe for medicine. We combined clay from riverbanks with lime that had been burning in kilns for days. Rice was cooked until it became a sticky paste, then mixed with the other ingredients to create a bond stronger than many rocks themselves. Sometimes we added crushed eggshells for smoothness, or ground stone dust for strength. The elderly women from nearby villages would come to help us, sharing secrets passed down through generations about making mortar that would last 1,000 years. The process of making this special mortar was almost ceremonial in its precision and care. Each ingredient had to be prepared in exactly the right way and added in the proper sequence to achieve the desired consistency and strength. The lime had to be slaked with just the right amount of water, neither too much nor too little. The rice paste had to be cooked to exactly the right consistency and cooled to the proper temperature before being incorporated into the mixture. Even the water we used was specially selected, coming from mountain springs that had been filtered through layers of rock and were free of impurities that might weaken the final product. The elderly women who helped us prepare the mortar were repositories of ancient knowledge, carrying in their minds recipes and techniques that had been developed over centuries of trial and error. They could tell by the color and texture of the mixture whether it would set properly, and they knew how to adjust the proportions to account for variations in temperature, humidity, and the quality of the raw materials. Their presence at the work site was considered a blessing, and we always treated them with the greatest respect and gratitude for their invaluable contribution to our work. In those early days, I worked alongside men who became like brothers to me. There was Lee the Strong, whose muscles bulged like melons and who could carry stones that would challenge 3 ordinary men. He came from a family of blacksmiths and could make tools from scraps of metal with just a hammer and his determination. When he laughed, which was often, the sound rolled across the mountainside like friendly thunder, making everyone smile even when the work was hard. Lee's strength was legendary among the workers, but what impressed me even more was his gentle nature and generous spirit. Despite his intimidating physical presence, he was always ready to help anyone who was struggling with a heavy load or a difficult problem. He had an intuitive understanding of leverage and mechanical advantage that allowed him to move enormous stones with minimal effort, and he was always eager to teach these techniques to others. His laughter truly was contagious, lifting everyone's spirits during the most challenging days and creating a sense of joy even in the midst of back-breaking labor. Then there was Chen the Careful, whose real name was Chen, but we called him Careful because he examined every stone as if it were a precious jewel. He had been trained as a scholar before coming to work on the wall, and he could write beautiful characters and solve difficult problems with numbers. In the evenings, he would scratch poems into smooth stones with a nail, creating verses about our work and our hopes. Many of those poem stones were built right into the wall, so that future generations might discover them and know that we had dreams as well as strong backs. Chen's scholarly background brought a different perspective to our work, helping us understand the mathematical and engineering principles that made the wall strong and stable. He could calculate angles and measurements with remarkable precision, ensuring that our construction followed the exact specifications laid out by the master architects. His poems, carved into stones that became part of the wall itself, were like messages in bottles sent to the future, carrying our thoughts and feelings across the centuries to people we would never meet. Old Wang was the cook for our section of workers, but he was much more than that. He had traveled to distant lands as a young man, trading silk and tea, and he knew songs and stories from places with names like music. While we ate our evening rice, he would tell us tales of cities built on water, of mountains that breathed fire, and of people who lived in houses made entirely of ice. His stories made our own great work seem part of something larger, connecting us to the whole wide world beyond our mountain. The rhythm of our work became like a dance that never ended. We would wake before dawn, when the air was cool and full of energy. The first light would find us already moving stones, mixing mortar, checking the trueness of our lines with string and wooden measures. As the sun climbed higher, the work grew harder, but we found ways to help each other. Someone would always be ready with a drink of water, a helping hand with a heavy load, or a joke to lighten the mood when spirits began to flag. Spring came to the mountains like a shy maiden, bringing gentle rains that made the wildflowers bloom in carpets of color across the slopes. The work changed with the season, becoming easier in some ways and more challenging in others. The winter ice that had made our hands numb and our breath visible in white puffs finally melted, allowing us to work with stone and mortar without fighting the bitter cold. But the spring rains also created new problems, turning paths into streams of mud and making it difficult to keep our materials dry. The mountain meadows came alive with flowers during those spring months, tiny blue blossoms that carpeted the ground like fallen pieces of sky, yellow blooms that nodded in the breeze like friendly faces, and patches of red flowers that seemed to glow with their own inner fire. Wild herbs grew among the stones, filling the air with fragrances that reminded us of home. Mint that could be brewed into refreshing tea, thyme that made our simple food taste like feasts, and lavender that helped us sleep peacefully despite our aching muscles. Sometimes, during our brief rest periods, we would gather these herbs to dry and send home to our families as gifts that carried the scent of the mountains. Master Huang taught us that the wall was not built in straight lines, but followed the wisdom of the mountains themselves. Water always finds the easiest path down a mountain, he explained as we worked on a particularly challenging curve. But the wall must take the strongest path, following the ridges where the foundation is solid rock, avoiding places where winter snows might slide or spring floods might weaken the earth. Every turn and angle of the wall was planned with the care of a master painter composing a great work of art. The arrival of summer brought new energy to our work site. The days grew long and warm, allowing us to work from the first grey light of dawn until the last purple shadows of dusk. The mountain paths dried out and became easier to navigate, making it possible to bring heavier stones and more supplies to places that had been unreachable during the muddy spring. Fresh vegetables and fruits began arriving from the valleys below, carried by traders who marveled at the growing wall and spread news of our progress to distant villages. Summer mornings on the mountain were magical times. The air was cool and fresh, filled with the songs of birds that nested in crevices along the cliff faces. Mist would rise from the valleys below like the breath of sleeping dragons, gradually burning away as the sun climbed higher in the clear blue sky. These were the hours when we could work most efficiently, when the stones were cool to the touch and the mortar would set properly without drying too quickly in the heat. The sound of our work would echo across the peaks, the steady rhythm of hammers, the scrape of stones being fitted together, and the voices of men calling encouragement to each other across the construction site. But summer also brought its own hardships. The sun blazed down on us with an intensity that could exhaust even the strongest man. We learned to start work while the air was still cool, rest during the hottest part of the day, and return to our tasks in the gentler light of evening. Water became precious, and we developed systems for sharing it fairly among all the workers. The older men taught us to wrap wet cloths around our heads and necks, creating our own portable shade that would keep us cool even under the burning sun. During the hottest afternoons, when direct work became dangerous, we would retreat to shaded areas where other important tasks awaited. Stones needed to be shaped and prepared for the next day's construction. Tools required sharpening and repair after the hard use of the morning hours. Plans had to be studied and discussed, ensuring that each section of wall would connect properly with neighboring sections being built by other teams. These quieter hours became times of learning and fellowship, when experienced workers would share their knowledge with newcomers, and when friendships deepened through shared stories and gentle laughter. I learned to read the weather like a book written in the sky. Certain clouds meant rain was coming, and we would need to cover our fresh mortar with straw mats to keep it from washing away. When the wind blew from the north, we knew to expect cold nights and would gather extra firewood for our camps. If the morning mist hung low in the valleys, it meant the day would be clear and perfect for lifting stones to great heights. We became partners with the sky and the seasons, working with nature rather than against it. It was during that first summer that I witnessed one of the most amazing sights of my life. A section of the wall that had taken us months to complete was finally ready for its capstone ceremony. Workers from all along the mountain ridge gathered to watch as Master Huang himself placed the final stone, a piece of white granite that seemed to glow with inner light. As that stone settled into its permanent home, a cheer arose from hundreds of throats, echoing off the mountain walls, like the voice of the earth itself, celebrating our achievement. The autumn months brought their own special beauty to our mountain home. The leaves of the few trees that grew at our elevation turned brilliant shades of red and gold, as if the mountains had dressed in their finest clothes to honor our work. The air became crisp and clear, so pure it seemed we could see to the end of the world from the high places where we worked. Flocks of birds began their journey south, sometimes stopping to rest on the completed sections of wall, as if even the wild creatures recognized and approved of what we were creating. This was the season for the most precise and careful work. The cool, dry air was perfect for setting mortar that would cure slowly and strongly. We could work steadily all day without the exhaustion that summer heat brought, allowing us to focus on the finest details of our craft. It was in autumn that we built the most beautiful watchtowers with their graceful curves and perfectly fitted stones. These towers rose from the wall like flowers growing from a stem, each one a work of art as well as a fortress. I remember one perfect autumn day when the morning frost sparkled on the stones like scattered diamonds. The air was so still that we could hear the distant sound of temple bells from villages far below in the valleys. As I worked on fitting a particularly challenging stone into place, I realized that I had learned something precious, not just the skill of stone masonry, but the deeper satisfaction that comes from creating something beautiful and permanent. Each day's work was adding to something that would outlast not just my own life, but the lives of many generations yet to come. By my third year on the wall, I had learned to see it not as a barrier, but as a great dragon sleeping across the mountains. Its stone scales caught the light of sunrise and sunset, glowing like ancient gold in the changing hours of each day. The watchtowers were its eyes, always watchful, always alert, gazing out over the vast wilderness beyond. And we workers were like the blood flowing through its mighty body, bringing life and strength to every part of its incredible length. The wall had become a living thing in my mind, breathing with the wind that flowed over its ramparts, growing stronger with each stone we added to its massive form. In the early morning light, when mist clung to its base and the sun painted its top edge gold, it looked like something from my grandmother's stories, a magical barrier between the world of ordinary people and the realm of spirits and legends. Birds would nest in its crevices, making it their home, and wild vines would sometimes grow in the joints between stones, adding touches of green life to the gray permanence of worked stone. Master Huang had grown older during our time together, but his wisdom had deepened like wine in a buried jar. His movements had become more deliberate, each gesture containing the accumulated knowledge of decades of building. He began to share with me secrets that he had learned from his own teacher, knowledge passed down through generations of master builders. "Wei," he said one morning as we watched the mist rise from the valleys below, "the wall we are building is more than stone and mortar. It is the dreams of our people made solid, the hopes of our children given form. Every stone carries a prayer, every tower holds a promise that our homeland will be safe and strong." He taught me to recognize the subtle signs that showed whether our work would last through the centuries. A wall section that sang softly when the wind passed over, it was built with perfect harmony between its parts. Stones that had found their true places would settle deeper into their mortar beds each winter, becoming more secure with each passing year. And mortar, mixed with the right proportions, would actually grow harder over time rather than crumbling with age. During this time, I began to take on the responsibility of training newer workers who arrived each season. Young men would come from villages far and wide, their eyes bright with excitement and uncertainty, carrying bundles much like the one I had carried years before. I would remember my own first days and try to help them understand not just the techniques of wall building, but the spirit that made our work sacred. Some of these young workers became like younger brothers to me. There was Feng, a blacksmith's son who could repair any tool and improve the design of our lifting equipment. His innovations made our work easier and safer, and his cheerful nature made even the most difficult days seem manageable. Then there was Hao, a quiet young man who could calculate angles and measurements in his head faster than most people could work them out on paper. His precise planning prevented many mistakes and saved us countless hours of rebuilding work that hadn't been done correctly the first time. "Feel the mountain's heartbeat," I would tell them as we stood on the high ridges at dawn, watching the sun paint the peaks with light. Our wall follows the mountain's own wishes, flowing with its natural lines, resting on its strongest points. We are not imposing our will on the earth, but cooperating with it, becoming part of its ancient story. Some of the young workers understood immediately, their hands seeming to know instinctively where each stone belonged. Others needed more time and patience, but eventually they too felt the deep connection between builder and mountain. One of the most memorable moments of this period came when we were building a particularly challenging section where the wall had to cross a deep ravine. The solution required not just strength and skill, but creativity and courage. We constructed a temporary bridge from strong wooden beams, then built the wall in sections that would eventually meet in the middle, high above the rushing stream far below. The day we placed the final stone in that aerial section was a day of great celebration. Workers from 5 different teams gathered to witness the moment when 2 months of careful construction would finally connect. Master Huang selected the closing stone himself, a piece of blue-gray granite that fit the gap as perfectly as if it had been created specifically for that purpose. As it slid into place with a sound like a sigh of satisfaction, we all felt we had accomplished something that would be remembered as long as mountains stood. The morning came when Master Huang called me to walk with him along the highest completed section of our wall. His steps had grown slower over the years, but his eyes still held the bright clarity of someone who saw deep meaning in everything around him. We climbed the stone steps to the top of the tallest watchtower, where we could see the wall stretching away in both directions, like a great serpent of stone following the mountain ridges. The view from that tower was breathtaking beyond words. To the north, wild lands stretched to the horizon, rolling grasslands where herds of horses ran free, forests so vast they looked like green seas, and mountains so distant they appeared as blue shadows against the sky. To the south, the familiar landscape of our homeland spread out below us, terraced fields climbing hillsides like giant staircases, villages tucked into protected valleys, rivers winding like silver ribbons through the landscape. The wall stood between these two worlds, a bridge between the known and the unknown, the civilized and the wild. "Wei," he said, placing his weathered hand on the parapet we had built together. "Do you remember your first day here, when you could barely lift a stone that now seems light as a feather to you? Look at what you have become, not just a builder, but a keeper of ancient wisdom, a bridge between the past and the future. The skills you have learned, the patience you have developed, the understanding you have gained, these are treasures more valuable than gold or jade." As we stood there together, Master Huang began to share stories I had never heard before, tales of the very beginning of the wall project, when the first stones were laid by workers whose names were already forgotten. He spoke of the master architects who had planned the wall's route, men who had spent years walking the mountain ridges, studying the land, learning where the wall could best be placed for maximum strength and efficiency. These planners had been like poets, he said, composing a great epic, not with words, but with stone and earth, writing their vision across the landscape for future generations to read and wonder at. "Tell me, my young friend," Master Huang said, settling himself on a stone bench built into the tower wall, "what do you see when you look at all we have accomplished?" The question seemed simple, but I knew from years of working with him that his simple questions often held depths like hidden pools in a mountain stream. I took my time to really look, to see not just the stones and mortar, but the meaning beneath. "I see the dreams of our emperor made real," I said slowly, choosing my words with care. "I see protection for our people, strength against those who would harm us. But I also see something more. I see proof that when people work together with shared purpose, there is nothing we cannot achieve. Every stone in this wall was placed by human hands, guided by human hearts, inspired by human hopes for the future. Master Huang nodded approvingly, his white beard stirring in the mountain breeze. Yes, you have learned to see with the eyes of a true builder. This wall is all of those things, but it is something else as well. It is a teacher that will instruct future generations in the values we hold dear: persistence, cooperation, attention to detail, respect for both tradition and innovation. Long after we are gone, people will walk along this wall and feel in their hearts the dedication of all those who built it. As we sat together in the afternoon sunshine, I realized that this was one of those moments that would stay with me forever, the kind of perfect afternoon when everything seems to come together in harmony. The air was warm but not hot, filled with the scent of pine and stone dust and the wild herbs that grew among the rocks. Eagles circled high above us, their wings catching thermals that lifted them higher and higher until they were just specks against the blue sky. The sound of work continued below us, hammers ringing against stone, voices calling instructions, the rumble of cart wheels on stone pathways, but from our height it blended into a peaceful rhythm like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. As the evening deepened and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Master Huang stood and walked to the edge of the platform. He looked out over the wall one more time, his eyes following its path as it disappeared into the gathering shadows. "My friends," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years but also the lightness of deep satisfaction, "tomorrow I will be leaving this place to return to my village, where my grandchildren wait to hear stories of the Great Wall. But part of me will remain here forever, built into every stone we have placed together." The news came as a surprise, though perhaps it should not have. Master Huang had been training me and several others to take over his responsibilities, passing on not just technical knowledge, but the deeper wisdom of leadership and craftsmanship. He had been preparing us, in his patient way, to carry on the work without him. Still, the thought of continuing without his guidance felt like trying to navigate by stars that had suddenly vanished from the sky. "Do not look so worried, Wei," he said, seeing the concern in my eyes. "You have learned well, and you are ready to teach others as I have taught you. The knowledge I have shared with you is not mine alone. It belongs to all who love this work and understand its importance. Take what I have given you and make it your own. Then pass it on to those who come after. This is how the great traditions continue, how the wisdom of generations flows like a river from the past into the future." The next morning brought Master Huang's farewell, a ceremony attended by workers from all along our section of the wall. He spoke briefly about the honor of serving the great work, about the bonds of friendship that made hard labor joyful, and about the satisfaction that comes from creating something beautiful and lasting. Then he presented me with his most treasured possession, a set of stone-cutting tools that had belonged to his own teacher, tools worn smooth by generations of skilled hands. These tools have shaped stone for more than 60 years, he said, placing them carefully in my hands. They have built temples and bridges, palaces and fortresses, and now they have helped create this greatest of all walls. Use them well, and when your time comes, pass them on to someone who will honor their history and continue their work. Remember that tools are not just metal and wood. They are the carriers of tradition, the links between past and future. Years passed like seasons, and I watched my own students become teachers in their turn. Young men who had arrived uncertain and untrained grew into master craftsmen, capable of solving the most difficult construction problems. Some of them eventually left to work on other sections of the wall, carrying with them the knowledge and values they had learned. Others stayed to help train the next generation of workers, keeping alive the traditions that made our work more than just piling stone upon stone. The wall had grown to incredible proportions during my years of service. What had once been scattered sections of construction had joined together to form an unbroken barrier that stretched farther than any man could walk in a month of days. Messages could now travel its entire length, carried by runners who knew every watchtower and every mountain pass along the route. Supply caravans moved along its base like blood, flowing through the veins of a great organism, bringing materials and food to workers at distant locations. One spring morning, as I was examining a particularly beautiful section of wall that sparkled with dew in the early sunlight, a young man approached me carrying a familiar cloth bundle. His eyes held the same mixture of excitement and uncertainty that I remembered from my own first day on the mountain. "Master Wei," he said, bowing respectfully, "my name is Jun, and I have come from my village to help build the Great Wall. Will you teach me the sacred arts of stone and mortar?" Looking at him, I saw myself as I had been so many years ago, young, eager, and completely unaware of how much I was about to learn and grow. I saw the future of the great work, the continuation of the ancient traditions, the promise that the wall would continue to grow long after I was gone. "Yes, young Jun," I said, placing my hand on his shoulder just as Master Huang had once placed his hand on mine. "I will teach you all that I know. But be prepared to learn more than just building techniques. You will discover who you truly are and what you are capable of achieving." During the quiet evening hours, when the day's work was done and we sat around our cooking fires, sharing simple meals and gentle conversation, I would often find myself thinking about the incredible journey that had brought me to this place. A young farmer from a small village had become a master builder, a keeper of ancient knowledge, a teacher responsible for passing on traditions that were older than memory. The transformation had been so gradual that I hardly noticed it happening, like the slow change of seasons or the imperceptible growth of the wall itself. And so the great work continued, passed from teacher to student, from generation to generation. The wall grew longer and stronger with each passing season, but more importantly, it continued to build character in those who worked on it. Each stone placed was an act of faith in the future. Each tower raised was a promise to protect those who could not protect themselves. We were not just building a barrier of stone and mortar, we were building a legacy of dedication, cooperation, and hope that would inspire people for thousands of years to come. As I lay down to sleep each night in my simple quarters on the mountainside, surrounded by the sounds of wind in the stones and the distant voices of night guards calling to each other from tower to tower, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from a life well lived. I had found my calling in the work of my hands, my purpose in the service of something greater than myself. The Great Wall had taught me that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things, that patience and persistence could overcome any obstacle, and that the greatest monuments were built not just of stone, but of human dreams and determination. The wall stretched on through the darkness, invisible but strong, carrying within its stones the hopes and prayers of everyone who had worked on it. It would continue to grow, continue to protect, continue to inspire, long after all of us who built it had returned to the earth from which its stones were quarried. This was our gift to the future, not just a barrier against enemies, but a testament to what could be achieved when people worked together with love, dedication, and an unshakable belief in the importance of their shared mission. And in my dreams that night, as in so many nights before, I walked along the completed wall as it wound through mountains that stretched to the ends of the earth. The stones beneath my feet hummed with the voices of all who had placed them there, a choir of workers singing songs of accomplishment and joy. The wall was alive with the spirits of those who had built it, and it would remain alive as long as people remembered the power of working together toward a common goal. This was the true magic of the Great Wall, not that it was made of stone, but that it was made of dreams transformed into reality by the patient work of countless hands and hearts. Now, as I sit here in my old age, watching the sun set behind the mountains where I spent so many years of my life, these memories of home feel more precious than any treasure. The village where I was born shaped the man I became, just as surely as my hands shaped the stones of the Great Wall. The patience I learned from watching rice grow in flooded fields served me well when I had to wait for mortar to cure properly. The cooperation I saw among villagers helping each other with harvests taught me how to work alongside men from many different places and backgrounds. The respect for tradition that my grandmother instilled in me helped me understand that building the wall was not just about creating something new, but about honoring something ancient and enduring. And when I think of that small village now, I know that everything I learned there about hard work and patience, about family and community, about dreams and determination went into every stone I placed, every wall I built, every student I taught. The Great Wall may stretch across mountains and deserts, but it begins and ends in the human heart, in the simple values that make us who we are. This is perhaps the greatest lesson of all, that the most magnificent achievements grow from the humblest beginnings, nourished by love and watered with dedication until they become wonders that inspire the world. And so, dear listeners, the Great Wall continues to stand today, a reminder that the most incredible achievements begin with ordinary people willing to place one stone upon another, day after day, season after season, until something magnificent emerges from their dedication. Wei's story reminds us that in working together with patience and love, we can build things that will outlast our own brief lives and inspire generations yet to come. May your own dreams be built with the same patience and love that Wei and his fellow workers brought to their great task. And may you sleep peacefully tonight, protected by the knowledge that determined people working together can accomplish anything, creating wonders that will stand as monuments to human possibility for all time to come.